Welcome to the Unmuted Podcast. My name is Jeff, and I'm the host of the podcast where we talk about all things HR, talent, HR tech, the world of work, AI, everything. So this one's a really, a bit of a different episode that we're going to do here. Before we dive into that, I just want to say that all of our episodes live on our website, GoScaleHR.com, and also on YouTube as well. And so please share your thoughts, comments, all of that great stuff. And so, as I said just a moment ago, this episode is a bit different than usual. Instead of me actually asking all the questions and interviewing our guest, I'm going to be joined by the brilliant Limor Markman, who always seemed to be 10 steps ahead of me because we've been building something together called Orbi. It's a 24/7 chat, GPT-powered HR advisor for leaders, practitioners, and teams. Yes, you've probably seen lots of really great stuff coming out from me, and I'm sorry to bombard all of you. Not sorry. But we're going to talk a bit about some of the things that influence why we did this. And so I'm going to just kick it off with a bit of a commentary and with a couple points, and then we're going to do a little bit of a back and forth, which is not typical, but that's fine. I don't do things normally anyway. So here we go. So point number one. And I think a lot of my audience here will probably agree with me on this, but AI has become one of the biggest conversations in HR. But for many practitioners and leaders, the experience has been mixed, and there's curiosity, also excitement, but also frustration, uncertainty, and overload. I'm probably going to see a lot of head nodding, and so that's the first point. The second point is over the past year, Limor and I have paid really close attention to what the HR community has been saying and what they actually need. And those insights have really been quite interesting, has shaped, influenced how we built Orbi. And today we're going to unpack that journey. And so, Limor, it's great to talk to you about why we're doing this. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me on the Unmuted podcast. What an honor to get to step in, have a dialogue, and ask you a bunch of questions rather than just kind of answer them. So, like you shared, Jeff and I have been on a journey for quite some time, really looking at what's happening in the marketplace with AI from my lens on the world and specifically on HR with Jeff's expertise layered on top. And, one of the things that we have together really noticed is that there is a lot going on. People feel behind. You start following people, you're getting emails about the latest news, and it literally feels like you are being bombarded. And no matter how many tutorials you're watching or how much you're reading, it just seems to feel like you're always behind. And so, as a result of that, people's confidence is low. People are super curious and they know they need to get on the AI train, but it's hard to do. So, Jeff, would love to get your thoughts as you've been firsthand connected to so many people working in HR. What do you feel has really been their experience on the whole? Or what are some of the themes that you're hearing from people in HR trying to keep up with AI?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's been pretty interesting over the past sort of year and a half or so. But I know for a fact that pretty much every single person in the HR space is probably dabbling, they're experimenting. And of course, I've always said that, everything in life is a big bell curve. And so you always have your early adopters, and then you've got the most of your population, and then you've got your laggards. And so that's very, very true here as well for AI. So there's a lot of experimentation going on and a lot of playing and strategizing, but the confidence is not there yet. And I think many people have shared that they feel very behind, or they think they are. They don't know if they are. And actually, some people are actually much further ahead and they don't really realize that. And then some are quietly using the tools, but they're really unsure if they're using them well. Or I've been hearing a lot of people, they want to, use the tools. It's like it's there, but once again, the confidence. And so I think it's just a combination of the overwhelming feeling and then just being really, really busy nowadays. Obviously with HR being asked to do more with less. And so we're trying to upscale and learn. And then you've got new tools coming out like Claude, which is great, but obviously it's just another thing to sort of look at. And so I think that's sort of the overall arching thing.
Yeah, and kind of thank you for sharing that. I think what's really interesting is that this does take a toll on confidence. You're learning a new skill, you're applying it, you think you're ahead, something new comes out. Am I using it properly? Is there enough training? Do I have access to the tools? Is it okay that I'm working on my phone in the evenings, on my personal computer with my own tools? We hear that a lot. And so, with that, I'm curious to get your thoughts. I see it on the whole that confidence is being hit. What do you think it is specifically around prompting? So we're not jumping into intense workflow building. The average user is starting with prompting on some level. Why do you think that it's maybe particularly complicated or challenging for people in HR based on the work that they're doing as well?
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent question, and I think it's a matter of you people have to realize that obviously HR it is a practice of people, and so things that the HR people do, practitioner leader, there is a lot of risk involved, and so with a lack of confidence that my prompting skill sort of may not be giving me the best outcome, but they're also very concerned about is good enough actually enough? Is it compliant, right? So we talk about
Mm.
legislation, we talk about all the different things. And so there's still a lack of confidence is if, okay, so if I do this based on what the tool is telling me to do or actually encouraging me to do, is that actually compliant? Am I going to be on the right side of it? Does it make sense? And so a mediocre, being a mediocre is not good enough, right? And so and then coupled with the feeling of not being confident about the output of my prompting, it gets really, really messy. And so I think that that's the core of it. And I didn't really realize it actually. I really thought this wasn't going to be an issue, but it seems to be a pretty prevalent one. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, can you trust the output when you're working in an area of the business that is so sensitive and you need to be so precise, compliant, and
Yeah.
accurate? It's really important specifically, and we heard this a lot in our journey the past year and in the creation. And part of the reasoning behind Orbi was that, in reality, we needed to be able to have something that people could trust the output of, feel confident, without being concerned that the way that they prompted it compromised the output or was something that they couldn't trust.
Right.
Another layer that I hear in AI across the board and I know is really front and center in HR is people are busy. So not only do you need to have something that you can rely on as an output, in a quick moment, but you also need to be able to trust it and you can't spend an hour trying to figure it out. And so part of productivity and efficiency these days is really being able to have that happen for you at the drop of a hat, being able to find those answers, to be able to craft those policies, the work that you're doing, to be able to do it quickly. So, I'm curious for you and your thoughts on the importance of speed and simplicity when AI practitioners at all levels are working with AI.
Yeah, for sure. Ultimately, HR people are being pressed to do more stuff with less. And, I think they've been overloaded for about 6 years now. So since COVID started. And so now they're in a hybrid virtual world and it just, more pressure to hire people. And now they're dealing with like AI fraud and they're dealing with, other, employee health issues, obviously projects sort of layered on top of daily work and being sort of pushed and pulled in many different directions. And also, too, the HR works in, like isolation. I mean, it's a very isolating profession. Remember when I was an HR leader and I was the only one, and it was really difficult sometimes. I mean, you felt, very alone. And obviously, when you're trying to make sure that everything is actually aligned, and so what you're doing on the people side actually aligned to the business, and then companies are changing faster than you can blink an eye. AI is supposed to help teams move together separately, and then you have there's just a whole bunch of different things. And so obviously, what you want is you want a tool that you can actually use 24/7, that's in your back pocket, fingertips, that you're confident in, that you can actually rely on, and that's really what it's all about.
You said something interesting. Teams are supposed to be working together, moving in the same direction, but that isn't necessarily always the case. I mean, I can imagine from my understanding of, the HR role, especially, moving at the speed that the world is changing, the speed of technology, the pressure that they might have on them, that they probably do feel very alone much of the time to come up
Yeah.
with answers, solutions to challenges relatively quickly. So, I'm kind of curious, why does that matter so much? And I'm setting you up here because we, in the creation of Orbi, wanted to try to solve for this challenge, but thinking about how AI can play a meaningful role for someone in HR as an always available thought partner to be able to solve for some of their challenges. I mean, why do you feel like that matters so much? And a part two is, why are you proud of what Orbi offers?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to a story about 3 years ago. So I ran an event. It was probably just after the heyday of COVID, I guess. And I ran an event for, I think it was about 30 HR leaders in tech in Toronto. And it was supposed to be focused on a particular topic. I can't remember what it was. But what ended up happening is that somebody said, we are absolutely exhausted. And then someone else said, yeah, so am I. Right. And then it kind of snowballed from there. And I completely did like a 180. Like I pivoted away from our core topic and I said, why don't we just do something here a bit different here and just vent? Because one of the things, and you see everybody's like tension just right. And I realized that, that obviously HR leaders can't really vent internally. Why? Because they're dealing with things that are confidential and private and all these different things. And so they're almost in their own little bubble, and so they carry a lot of like emotional complexity. There's politics involved, which, as we know in our world, I'm not getting into that, but there's a lot of different things going on, and obviously need to have different points of views on difficult conversation, dealing with leaders, dealing with employees, like it start to get too much, right? And then obviously the other thing too I want to mention too that's come up a lot is budget. So
Yep.
obviously not every HR leader can have a real human being as a 24/7 advisor. I mean, that costs a lot of money. And so, Orbi comes into play. Yes, I am a huge advocate of having people, sure. But, there is massive value in having AI, work for you. And I think anyone who knows me knows that I'm a huge supporter of it because it feels human, right? And I can do it anytime I want. I'm in bed thinking about something at 2 a.m. and all of a sudden, boom, I pull out my phone. The other thing too is, you sometimes don't need a final answer. You just want a place to think and kind of brainstorm and all that kind of stuff. I think also AI can help you answer your own judgment, also. So there's a lot going on there, but I think having that, and we're so used to chatting on chat tools, right? So
Yeah.
now all of a sudden, talks back to you and then says, well, this is, what I think, and, get to know you. I'm like, that's hugely powerful. The fraction of a price, obviously a cost.
Absolutely. Well, it's great to hear, and it's how the world is evolving and emerging. And I think, over the past year or so, you and I have both been in our respective fields looking and identifying what are some of those patterns that we're seeing. And I think, when we really came together, particularly what we're hearing from the HR community is that people are not asking for more noise. They don't want more complexity. We don't need 100 more generic tools, things that, will not, we need to double check or get the sources right on. People wanted to have a greater level of confidence in their outputs. They wanted quick results and definitely a lot of more collaboration. So, like you were just saying, it's not necessarily someone to give you the answers, someone to be your sparring partner to help you get to the right answer, because ultimately you're the only one who knows the internal confidential challenges that you're working with, but it helps to really lift a lot of the heaviness. And I think, it became really clear to both of us, and really, we got into the concept of is that people in HR needed something that's built for the modern HR work that helps them to get a lot of their work done, something they could trust, and someone who's there for them all the time.
We actually, private betaed this tool last year, like late last year, and we tested it with about 20 HR
Different.
leaders. All 20 were actually using chat a GPT in sort of some fashion. And so they were kind of used to operating with it. And I think they recognized the look and feel of it, the how it worked, the UX, all of that. And so when you're building something like that, like why bother building something brand new that takes people away from what they're used to working with? And so it's kind of like Slack, where, if you want to do something on that social collaboration, well, most people use Slack anyways, and so why would you take them off of that? So that was the general thinking behind it, because I know that generally speaking, as a community, HR tends to be a little bit slower on the adoption side. I know there are a lot of early adopters out there. I know who you all are, but generally speaking, why build something brand new and then have to spend time educating people? So what this is to meet people where they are and make it work. And so we actually tested it with people using Orbi and then not using Orbi, and it looked the same almost, but how it functions is quite different, and people get to what they want more confidently, using Orbi than they would if they're using native chat GPT. So.
Yeah, I mean, it was great to hear that. And it really ties into you need to be able to do some maybe more complicated and specific type of prompting if you want to try to get to this. But Orbi's also structured in a way that it asks a lot of questions, but gives you some possible answers in multiple choice. So you're able to move through the challenge quite a bit quicker. So, it was great to see that in the beta, real companies, real people working in HR had so many great things to say about it. And I'm excited to see how we can continue to help and support those working in HR.
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched, and so the interest has been quite high so far, which is great. And so we look forward to engaging everybody. But Limor, I wanted to hear from you as a non-HR person. Was there something that stood out for you over the past year in sort of working on that?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really down to regardless of what function you're working in, is really using AI as a thinking partner that helps you move through the challenge, helps you to consider things you might not have considered before. As thinking individuals, it's not about asking AI to come up with a solution for us, but so much is possible in terms of things that you hadn't considered or different perspectives, that building this tool was something really neat so that we could really solve for strategic thinking followed by the steps for execution. So, I've loved how AI is your thinking partner first and then your supporter and execution second. And Orbi does both of those. So it's been really fun to bring this to life.
So that's fantastic. And so I hope that we gave you a bit of a glimpse into why, how, and why we did this. For those of you wondering, how the name came to be, so we were thinking about orbit. So how HR always tend to orbit. We're always in orbit. And so my middle son came to me and said, "Why don't you just drop the T and call it Orbi?" And like, that was brilliant. There you go. So that's how Orbi came to be. So Limor, thanks for doing this. And obviously, for those of you, who want more information about Orbi, you can check out the webpage. All of the links and so forth are in the comments below. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff.